Hey everybody, and welcome back. This is part 2 of this video series on building this hidden door in this wainscoting detail. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I kind of go over some of the secrets to designing a good hidden door, some of the advantages of using paint grade versus stain grade, what kind of hardware to use, how to use SketchUp or CAD to use pivot points so that your trim moldings will all work together the way they should, just some design stuff like that. So if you haven't seen part 1, check that out. This is part 2. I'm gonna show you how I went about building everything, the whole process, how it went together. So I hope you enjoy the video series. I'm sorry if it kind of jumps around a little bit. You know how it is when you kind of just get in the zone. I definitely had to focus at times, and I wasn't thinking about the camera and getting footage as much, but I think it'll still be valuable and enjoyable to you, so hope you enjoy. It's pretty slow going, getting everything dialed in, but you really have to take your time when you're doing this. So I'm at a point I want to show you everything I've done. I'm ready to start moving forward with putting this door in place. But the first thing I did is I attached my pieces to the door on the top and bottom, which is part of my pivot hardware. So you've already seen plenty of this piece. This is the top of my door jamb here. And again, to install the door, we turn this set screw and this pin goes in and out. You can see it goes up and down by turning that set screw. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the pin out right there. That's all the way out, and it will go inside the hole on this other piece. And I've got about an 1/8 inch gap that will be there, but that will allow the door to pivot in place, top and bottom. And then as you can see here, I attached a piece of 1/4 inch plywood. I needed this in order to match the wainscoting that I'm hiding this hidden door in. So I used PL Premium, smeared it on really good so I don't have globs, a nice thin layer, and then attached that with 5/8 long 22 gauge staples, so that'll adhere really well. Also notice I've got this perfectly flush across the top with my jamb. That's really important. I actually had this on and this was a little bit proud, so I shaved a strong 32nd off of it to get that perfect. Whenever you're hiding doors, these small, minute differences in material thickness can end up being a big deal further down the road. So I've got that perfectly flush right there. Let me take you to the bottom of the door and show you that. Here we have the bottom of the door. Let me grab the bracket. This is the bottom of the door, and this is the hardware piece that will mount to the floor. Very heavy duty piece. So this will go on the floor, and then the door will just simply pivot on top of that. Very heavy duty, very tight tolerances. I knew based off of the drawing that I did at home that I wanted the pivot point, top and bottom, to be 2 1/4 inches over from the edge of the door. So I was very careful to align the hardware that I put on the top and bottom of the door exactly 2 1/4 inches over, so that everything should be nice and plumb and work really well. But it's very important to take your time because this is all about maintaining that pivot point where you want it. I haven't put the door jamb together yet, but this is another detail. Thinking ahead is important. This is the side of my door jamb here, and I'm gonna have 1/4 inch plywood coming into this. Now this will be covered with a style of 1x6 whenever it's closed, but whenever the secret door opens, it's going to expose this area. So I want my 1/4 inch plywood to join into the side of my door jamb as nicely as I can. So I went ahead and glued and pin nailed this cleat along the side. That way, hopefully whenever I install this plywood, I can get a nice joint right here between the plywood and the door jamb that will paint up nicely. And then I'll also be able to nail the plywood into this cleat right here and glue it. Everything will go together nicely. At least that's the plan. So at this point, I have my plywood on the face of the door. I've got my hardware installed, bottom, on the jamb, and on the top of the door. The next step is to assemble this jamb material, take that up and install it, and we'll start getting this door put in place. All right guys, got my door in position and I just wanted to show you how I went about this quick. So you'll have your door slab, your brackets are attached to it. You want to get your jamb in position approximately where you think it should be. I nailed it off. I got my head jamb shimmed tight so it's not moving. But then you take your bottom bracket down here, you set your door down on it, you get your top bracket in position, and while the door is open, I'll just open this for you. You screw in that set screw, which drops the pin down into place here. So from that point, you have your weight is on the door, it's on the bottom bracket, and you can move that bottom bracket wherever you need to make everything be exactly as you need it to be. Now, as I mentioned before, this door will be concealed in wainscoting that'll cover this entire wall. And the first layer of that wainscoting will be a 1/4 inch plywood, which is what I put on the face of this door. So we had the door and then I put that 1/4 inch plywood on that. So that means that my door and my jamb need to be a 1/4 inch proud of my drywall here, so that whenever I put that 1/4 inch plywood on, it all comes out even. So I very carefully got everything in position where I thought it should be, put the door on the pin and moved it and adjusted it until I've got the reveal I want on both sides. I need to have 3/4 of an inch here so that whenever I put the trim on, it can actually pivot freely. You'll see more of that later. So aside from having the correct margins and being off the wall a 1/4 inch so that my plywood slides right over the top right there and then will be flush across the face here, we want all of these planes to be in line. So I've got that all the way across. It's perfect. So I'm ready, it moved on me, but I'm ready at this point to go ahead and fasten this bracket. You can see here, at this point, there's no screws in it. It's just freely sitting there and it doesn't move. So you can kind of get it adjusted pretty easily without it being difficult. So I'm at the point now, I'm just gonna leave the door on it, pre-drill some holes and permanently put those screws in, and then it will be in its fixed position. To take the door down, it's super simple. We're just gonna turn this screw, the pin will lift up and we can just pop the door right off, no big deal. Okay, I don't even need a screwdriver, just gonna use my flat bar here, counterclockwise. And then it's just a matter of lifting it up off of the bottom pivot point. It's a piece of cake. Nail it off. Make sure it's nice and straight, level. Okay, now put the door back on. Drop this side, the bottom one, so it's a little pivot point there. I still got a line right here where I was working on things before, so I can help you line this up. You can feel it whenever that pin goes into the hole. And again, drop that screw all the way down. Now it's locked in place. All right, moving along here, getting my plywood installed on the walls. This is kind of a tricky part because I'm installing this plywood to my door jamb. You can see up here, I made this 1/4 inch rabbet into the top of the jamb. Plywood's gonna go in that. And then also this is where I had installed that nailer strip along the edge of my door jamb to accept this plywood. The idea here is to get a nice glue joint here, staple it, and then be able to sand it so it's somewhat flush, because this seam will be exposed whenever the door is open. All right guys, update here. As you can see behind me, I've got all of my 1/4-inch plywood skinned onto the wall. All of the joints between the plywood are between, basically underneath where I'm gonna have one of my 1x6 stiles or rails. So those will all be hidden. And what I've done now is I've laid out all of my 1x material on the wall. I've marked it out. And I'm gonna take it down and pocket hole screw it. Let me give you a closer look at what's going on. Basically, the whole time I've been working on this project, I've been wondering how I was going to assemble all of my 1x materials. Basically 2 options. I can pre-assemble with pocket hole joinery, or I could assemble in place with biscuits and pinch dogs. Ultimately, if it would have been just these vertical stiles here that I had to assemble, I probably would have went for biscuits and pinch dogs. But because I've got a rail that's gonna go all the way across here, I think it's gonna be better to just assemble it on the floor with pocket hole joinery. So the first thing I did was I put this board up top and I made sure that it was perfectly level, and then I scribed it to the ceiling. That was very important because I wanted to be able to cut all of my stile pieces the exact same length and know that everything would be level across. So that was the most crucial place to start, and I ended up running that piece all the way through because I wanted to be able to cut all these other pieces to the exact same length. Down here on the end, after I had my top rail in, I then got this piece in, and again I plumbed it and then I scribed it to the wall, so that is also perfectly plumb. From there I cut these 2 stiles, again the exact same length, and initially this is my end piece here, and it's got that really funky detail where my rails are going through here, and then they're 45'd right there and down there at the bottom as well. I ended up cutting the width of that top rail off of this piece, that way I could make all of those the same. So right now I essentially just have one brad nail holding that top rail in place. I got a brad nail holding this piece down on the end in place, and then I went ahead and figured out what the length of my bottom rail needed to be. This has a 5-degree bevel on it because this piece will go across the door and it needs to be able to slide into place. So having that 5-degree bevel is important. I didn't go with 45 or anything like that because I don't want to have a sharp corner sticking out on this side where you could kick it or damage it or something like that. Once I had my bottom rail and top rail in place, then I used my green laser here to plumb up from my layout marks, which I have there. So I've got marks on my top rail where these stiles will intersect into, as well as the bottom here, got those marks using this laser. And then across the top, we'll also have this horizontal rail. So that is also marked out across everything. So I'm gonna start taking all these pieces down. We will lay them on the floor out here and start pre-assembly. Guys, wanted to do a quick tool mention. This is not a very expensive tool, but it is worth its weight in gold. This is what I use whenever I'm pre-assembling a big, whether it's a wainscoting assembly or something like that. If it's too big to do on a workbench, this thing works fantastic to assemble on the floor. You can slide this plate underneath your 1x material, and it's thin enough that it doesn't really mess anything up, but it's got this Craig clamp that mounts right on the plate here, and it clamps down to your material really well. It's the old style adjustment, which I prefer over the Automax style. It just stays solid a lot easier, but this is a must-have tool if you're pre-assembling with pocket hole joinery on the floor. Makes it really nice and works really well. At this point, we're all pre-assembled. I've got adhesive here on the backside ready to put this in place. I considered attaching this end piece also, but if you can remember, I'm sorry, the sun's horrible right here. I've got these different grain directions here, and I was afraid if I put pressure on this leg, since it's not attached to anything, heaven forbid that crack right there across that grain, that would be horrible because I've got a bunch of time in making that piece, and basically everything else is based off of that piece. So I'm just going to biscuit and glue this connection up here, not going to pocket hole screw that, but we're ready to lift this in place and nail it off. Oh shit. Let's look now. So I ended up getting ahead of myself yesterday. I just got in the zone. I worked late and got the assembly aspect all wrapped up, and I didn't take a lot of footage of putting these pieces together on the door. So I want to show you how I did that and the overall design concept that we have here. We started off by getting all of our plywood sheets installed and then pre-assembled what pieces I could that were easy to do. I mentioned earlier I didn't want to try and use pocket hole screws on this long piece here in case it would have broke and split, being that there is cross grain going the opposite direction with this piece here. That would have been horrible if that would have broken. It would have cost me a lot of time. So I ended up using biscuits and pinch dogs up there to assemble that, and then I started just putting pieces in on this center area and kind of just making things fit as I went. Here's our active door. So the first pieces that I installed was actually this piece first because it was very simple. It's just a square cut and I was able to level across there. That was fairly simple. This piece right here, also fairly simple, but there is a 5-degree bevel going down like this. And then on the top piece here, I've got a 6-degree bevel right here. So that closes nicely. I very lightly sanded the side of this to give myself a very small space because I don't want the paint to rub off right here if at all possible. But that's going together really nicely. After I had piece 1, piece 2, then it was time for this piece number 3 to go in. It was also pretty easy to install. Again, just a 5-degree bevel on the top right there so that that would align pretty well. And then just brought it down to a square cut that goes across the top of this piece here. You can hear this kind of rubbing. It is going across the top right there, but I kind of like it because it gives it some friction and keeps it in place. It'll probably rub the paint off right there, but I guess I'm kind of just okay with it because it's going to be hidden and it helps align everything pretty nicely, so I'm okay with that. After I got that piece in, fitted this piece in right here, very small space between these joints. After it's all painted, it'll just kind of look like a mediocre wainscoting job, which would be typical from other carpenters in my area. But you'll have a hairline, shadow line on these joints that are active versus, you know, your perfectly painted crisp joints from all the other joints that are pocket hole screwed. So that's just part of it. Whenever you do hidden doors, you're gonna have that. You can't make it perfect unless you're kind of doing stain grade with an in-swing door and a lot of overlap joints. So we're doing the best with what we can with the design. Actually, no one gave me a design, but they gave me the mission, which was to hide this door on a wall of wainscoting. So that's what we're doing. Anyways, after that piece was in, put in that piece there, another one up here. This one isn't quite perfect. It's got a little space, but that's all right. Those are 45-degree joints, and they pivot like so. The door opens up to a little bit less than 90 degrees, and I designed it on the computer knowing that that's how it would be. I could have made the door so that it would open wider, but in order to do that, you have to move your pivot point over. And being that this was already only a 2-foot wide door slab, I didn't want to keep infringing on the space to go into this door opening. I wanted to try and keep the door opening as wide as possible. So that's the pivot point I ended up using. But again, if I would have adjusted this pivot point over further, then it would have allowed me to open the door a little bit more, but I'm okay with it as it is. So you guys who do carpentry for a living know how difficult this is to get a door to end up perfectly in plane so that all 4 of these corners and the space in between connect perfectly. But I'm very happy with the way this is working. You can see here as this opens up, the inside of the door rests against the inside of this 1x. That whole joint looks really nice when it's closed. I've also got a nice connection here down the side, and it goes together well. Also did have to do a little bit of sanding on this inside edge because it was kind of tilted just a hair, and that was keeping me bumped off so that this wasn't closing super tight. So with jobs like this, you kind of just have to keep rolling with it, keep working with it, and adjust things as needed until it's perfect. In terms of how to open and close the door, I can't use a push latch on this type of door situation because it can't be pushed in any. It's resting tightly, which is what I want. I want all of my joints to be as flush as possible. I don't want it sticking out 2 or 3 millimeters in order to be able to use a push latch. So what I opted to do was just to route a little handle here in the side of the door. That's going to get all painted white, and I think it'll be not very noticeable, but still fine. This is actually for a little girl's bedroom. It's going to be about an 8-year-old girl, sweet little thing. She's going to be using this door. So I didn't want anything overly complicated, getting fancy with magnets and stuff like that. This room will be carpeted, so you'll notice on the bottom under the door, I did have to cut that. It's about 1 1/8 off the subfloor. So if I need to cut more off, I can, but we'll see how thick the carpet is and if that'll work or not. So that's got to be able to swing over the carpet. So that's 1 1/8 off the floor, while the rest of everything is 1/2 inch off the floor so that carpet can be tucked in. Another key thing, I don't know if I mentioned it yet or not, but the door has to be able to pivot under the jamb. So part of the design concept that I went with was to have this rail going across here. And the whole purpose of that rail is it's hiding the shadow line in the space that is above the door. So I've got the camera right at face level, for me being 5'10" right now. You can't see anything weird up there, but watch if I lift the camera up and give you a closer look at what's actually going on above the top there. You see that I have to have that space there in order for the door to pivot, but whenever you're down here at eye level, you can't even tell it's there. So one of the other reasons I actually even went ahead and put a rabbet on the jamb, and I ran this plywood into the rabbet on the jamb because I wanted to keep this joint as low as possible, so that it's going to be hidden, so that even after paint, if it's slightly visible, you won't be able to see it because of where your eyes normally are down here. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. Just as a little context, this is a little girl's bedroom. So this is the hallway walking into the bedroom back here, coming from the main level right there. So we're walking in here, and we can open our secret door up. Just a fun little closet area. This is basically just a useless space that was above the stairs. So pretty cool. That was her big wish in the new house, was to have a secret door, and it was exciting to be able to execute this one, and I think they're really gonna like it. So good project, fun project. Glad it came together without any major issues. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Secret doors are the ultimate carpentry challenge, but hopefully this video helps you out if you need to build one or just need a little entertainment watching somebody else build one. So thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.